To The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something that is, well, frankly, it's deeply unsettling. We're looking at a highly viewed piece of source material titled Serial Killers Who Are Now Free, Part 1. Now, if you're focused on understanding the mechanics behind the information we consume every single day, this is going to be absolutely fascinating. We're going to break down the exact data points, the staggering numbers, and the digital packaging of this case to figure out exactly how real-world horror translates into modern digital content. So why does this actually matter? Well, the media landscape is shifting beneath our feet. The true crime genre has totally exploded, right? We aren't just passive consumers of history anymore. We are active participants in these algorithms that take real, visceral terror and turn it into bite-sized entertainment. And understanding how that packaging works is absolutely crucial to understanding our own digital habits. So, what happens when one of history's most prolific killers is currently a free man? Just let that sink in for a second. Usually when we consume historical crime data, there's a built-in psychological safety net. The timeline almost always ends with a capture, a lengthy trial, or maybe just the passage of a century that puts all those events safely in the distant past. That closure is exactly what allows us to engage with the darkness safely. But our explainer today focuses on a completely different, chilling reality presented in the source. The subject of this viral profile is not locked away. That safety net, it is entirely gone. The source frames its entire narrative around this terrifying, unresolved premise. It's asking the audience to confront a threat that isn't confined to a jail cell or a history book, but one that is actively breathing the same air we are today. Section 1. A chilling reality. Let's look at the primary subject of our source material. A man who is actively categorized today as a fugitive. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 2. Monster of the Andes. The source material doesn't bury the lead here. It immediately introduces its primary subject with a very specific active categorization. It doesn't just call him a criminal, it actively labels him a fugitive. And honestly, that single word completely changes the context, right? It bridges the gap between historical events and present-day reality. The source then gives us this stark contrast regarding his identity. On one hand, we have his factual legal profile, Pedro Alonso Lopez, a Colombian serial killer. But then it introduces his alias, the Monster of the Andes. It's deliberately contrasting his real bureaucratic identity with this deeply disturbing moniker. By attaching the word monster to a massive geographical region, the Andes, the source instantly establishes the immense scale of his crimes before we even look at a single statistic. It's a very deliberate framing choice. It strips away the human element of a legal name and elevates his profile into something much darker, almost mythological. And let's be real, that's exactly the kind of hook that algorithms love to reward. Section 3, staggering numbers. Let's prepare to look at the grim statistics and let the raw data speak for itself. The timeline provided by the source covers a vast, disturbing span of time. It grounds his reign of terror in hard clinical data. According to the text, the murders began in South America in 1969. The recorded time frame of these killings then officially halts in 1980, so that is an 11-year span of sustained, relentless violence. But the timeline doesn't end there, and what's really interesting here is how the meta-analysis jumps forward. It jumps over 4 decades to July 21st, 2024, culminating in a massive viral resurgence. Think about the sheer strangeness of that trajectory for a second. Crimes committed in the analog world of the 1970s are suddenly thrust into the digital feeds of the 2020s. A cold reality from over half a century ago is resurrected, just popping up on someone's screen as they scroll on a Tuesday afternoon. The source is using this timeline not just to document the crimes, but to show exactly how historical trauma is recycled for modern digital consumption. 110, I want to deliver this number as starkly as it appears in the source material. According to the text, 110 is the confirmed bare minimum number of people Pedro Alonso Lopez murdered during that 11-year time frame. It's a staggering baseline that is frankly just difficult to even comprehend. When a source verifies a baseline number this exceptionally high, the narrative shifts completely. We aren't looking at an isolated incident or some localized threat. A confirmed count of 110 represents a systemic, prolonged campaign of violence that went unchecked for over a decade. It really forces us to grapple with the sheer logistical horror of that many lost lives. And honestly, it makes the fact that he's currently a free man all the more jarring to process. But then, the source throws out another number entirely, over 300. So the crucial point is this. The text notes that Lopez himself claimed this much higher number. By including this self-reported statistic, the source explicitly cements his status, stating plainly that this makes him one of the serial killers with most kills in recorded history. But you kind of have to ask, why would a source emphasize an unverified claim from the killer himself? Well, on one hand, it might be an attempt to establish the true horrifying scale of the destruction he caused, acknowledging the very real possibility of victims who were just never found. But on the other hand, it undeniably adds to the dark mythos that fuels true crime virality. That massive gap between the confirmed 110 and the claimed 300 plus, it leaves a horrifying margin of unknown victims. And that unknown margin creates a terrifying mystique, transforming him from a documented criminal into this larger-than-life figure, which, again, perfectly sets the stage for viral engagement. Section 4, True Crime Goes Viral. Let's shift our focus to how this story is packaged.
So, looking at the meta context here, how is this data being consumed right now by the channel Unmasking Crimes? Over 1.3 million, specifically 1,314,116 views as of July 2024. This is a fascinating piece of commentary on our digital consumption. Just contrast those horrifying victim counts we just talked about, the 11 to 300, with this staggering modern metric. It's surreal, isn't it? Over 100 real lives lost, and decades later, over 1 million people actively chose to click, watch, and engage with that tragedy as a form of content. This single metric completely transforms the historical data from a closed case file into a modern viral phenomenon. It essentially proves that the appetite for unresolved, high-stakes true crime is absolutely massive. And it shows that algorithms are incredibly efficient at delivering exactly what captures human curiosity, no matter how grim it gets.
Furthermore, the source indicates exactly 592 comments were left on this profile. Now, this isn't just passive viewing. This represents massive, immediate digital engagement from the public. Hundreds of individuals felt compelled to actively interact, to discuss, or just react to the reality of the monster of the Andes walking free today. This active engagement tells us something really profound about human psychology. When we're faced with an unresolved threat, we don't just want to sit there and watch silently, right? We want to process it collectively. That comment section acts like a modern-day town square, where people gather to express their shared disbelief, their fear, and their morbid fascination. It's interactive trauma processing, where the audience transitions from isolated viewers into this mobilized, vocal community centered entirely around the digital footprint of a fugitive. Finally, let's look at the actual digital architecture used to push this story out to those millions of viewers. The source lists specific tags used to categorize this video, and this brilliantly illustrates the modern media landscape. We see these broad analytical genre markers like #TrueCrime, #psychology, #investigation, and #crime documentary. Now, those tags appeal to the analytical mind, the viewer who really wants to understand the how and the why, approaching the whole topic like an armchair detective. But mixed right in with those, we see purely emotional, sensational triggers. #monster, #disturbing, #scary. Think about the psychological journey of a user scrolling through this stuff. A clinical tag like #investigation promises facts, right? It makes you feel like you're learning something valuable. But #monster, that taps directly into our primal fears. A real-world tragedy spanning decades with hundreds of victims, carefully distilled into a cocktail of searchable, SEO-friendly digital tags. They're explicitly designed to capture both our intellectual curiosity and our deepest anxieties at the exact same time. Which brings us to our final thought. The source we explored today isn't just some list of terrible facts. It is a highly successful piece of digital media, and it leaves us with this jarring juxtaposition to ponder. How exactly does a fugitive with a minimum of 110 victims transition from a terrifying, breathing reality into a neatly packaged piece of digital entertainment, complete with hashtags in a comments section? It's a really complex question about our modern consumption of history, the mechanics of viral content, and the actual depths of our own morbid curiosity. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep questioning the media you consume, and I will see you next time.